I'm Mark Doty, and you are probably wondering what the heck is going on. Because, come on, I do the demos of the vintage synths and the analog synths, and here is the Volca FM sitting in front of me, and you might know that there's nothing analog about this at all. So what the heck am I doing? Well, Korg asked me, they're like, hey, do you want to do the Volca FM? I'm like, wait, do you know who I am? And yeah, they do. But I was like, if I do this, it's going to be, people are going to freak out. I might be in danger. So we laughed about that and agreed that I should do it. So here I am doing the Volca FM. It's my first demo of a hardware synthesizer that is totally digital. And come on, this is like the most terrifying form of synthesis that exists. So yeah, I had to take the challenge. It's going to be fun. You probably hate me, but I'm going to do it. Okay. So what I want to do, I want to start off and just cover, the front interface, because there are some really cool things happening with the front interface that we're desperately missing on the DX7. And you'll have to forgive me if I'm constantly referring to the DX7, because I know a lot of FM synths have come out since then, but I'm the vintage guy. So, I just have not kept up with what was going on with FM. So I'm constantly going to be making references back to the DX7, and you're going to be like, instead of getting mad, just say, okay, Grandpa. So we're going to talk about the front panel, and it'll help us to sort of address some of the aspects of FM synthesis, which I have to admit is somewhat interesting as a synthesis style. Okay, let's start off. First of all, the Volca FM has a fair amount of presets, and I'm going to be using them to demonstrate some of this functionality. I just kind of want to go over these functions that are staring us in the face as we look at it. And I want to tell you that you won't see me playing it very much, except for when I have to, because I'm triggering it with a Korg Minilog. Number one, because it's Korg. Number two, it's analog. So at least something analog is happening. It's an analog MIDI signal, I guess. Yeah, that's bad. That's embarrassing. Anyway, no. So you're not going to see me necessarily playing the keys because I'm not as expedient as that when we're talking about polyphony as I can be playing the Korg Minilog. So, and it's all in the family because it's Korg, right? Okay, so about this synthesizer. First, we have the Transpose Slider over here. And it does exactly what you would imagine. It just shifts it various octaves. Now, something I need to make clear to you right away is that if you hold a chord and slide the slider, nothing happens. Now, this is obviously some digitally related thing, and I've seen people already start to be like, well, that should do this or whatever, but come on, how much did you pay for this thing? It's so powerful that, I don't feel motivated to make a big deal about these sort of things that might be perceived by some as limitations. But the fact of the matter is, you did hear changes. Every new iteration reflected the changes being made, so you can actually use it as a fun and funky little effect. And also, you can use it to shift octaves if you need to. So that's helpful in performance. The next thing that we're going to talk about is this velocity slider. Okay, so we need to talk a little bit about FM. And I'm sorry to do this to you. It's like a doctor visit almost, I think, for some people. It certainly was for me. But okay, so in FM, you have operators. You also have modulators and carriers. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't stand being introduced to new terminology that I have to learn some new meaning, and then the way that the terminology interacts with other terminology that I don't know. It gets really confusing. But let's simplify this right away and make it just as clear as possible. Operators are called operators. They're really oscillators. Now, they are more than oscillators. They're actually an oscillator and an amp and an envelope generator. So when you take the oscillator and the amp and the envelope generator and you put them all together, you have an operator. So when we say operator, we're kind of like saying oscillator package. Okay, so that's simple. Carrier is the word that really confuses me. When I first started, I'm like, carrier. It seems like a really complex thing. But in this, carriers are just the operators that are playing a note. They're just like an oscillator playing a tone, which is the normal thing that oscillators do. So when I say carrier, what I'm really saying is an operator playing a tone, or just it means a tonal oscillator. Modulator is pretty simple. That's just an oscillator that is acting as a modulator to the carrier. The modulators modulate the frequency of the carriers with their own sine waves. Now, in FM, more often, modulators are not LFOs, they are HFOs, high frequency oscillators. So they're just basically high frequency oscillators that are modulating the frequency of tonal oscillators that we're hearing. We don't hear the modulators, we just hear the carriers, but the modulator modulates the frequency of the carriers. So really, all of that terminology, we're just talking about oscillators, basically oscillators that are being modulated. It's really no different than pushing up the mod wheel on a synthesizer and hearing vibrato. This is very, very fast, high frequency vibrato, but it's the same thing. It's just a sine wave oscillator with vibrato from another sine wave oscillator. So that's what we're talking about. But because these modulators are high frequency, what happens is by modulating an oscillator with a high frequency oscillator, you create really complex waveforms. And it's like a shortcut to creating complex waveforms. And that's really all that's going on. So velocity, originally in like the DX7, velocity was an effect where the harder you press the key, the more modulation would occur, the more the modulators would affect the carriers to create a brighter sound, which is basically what happens, when you hit a piano note or chord, you hit harder and it causes higher frequency vibrations to occur with greater amplitude. So that's basically what's happening with the velocity. We're just modulating our oscillators a little bit more brightly. Does that make sense? Okay, so here's what it sounds like. So basically it's just turning up the amplitude of the modulation that's happening with the operators. I should also point out that we're just still on the same preset, and now it sounds completely different. So what this really is doing is allowing you some timbral diversity within your preset, and that's always cool, especially in performance. But I do have to point out that this velocity slider, like the transpose slider, you don't get the changes if you're just holding a chord. It's with each new iteration of a note or chord that you get the effect. So it would be really cool because it'd be like a filter cutoff knob. I mean, you'd constantly be using that velocity thing if it did that. But it doesn't do that. But since so often we're playing notes, it works very, very well. Okay, so we're on to this section here where we're talking about modulators and carriers. Now, each operator, which is an oscillator package, each operator has an envelope generator in it, right? We talked about that. Whether it's a modulator or a carrier, it's got its own envelope in there. Now, what these four knobs do is they make global changes to all of the envelopes in the modulators and all of the envelopes in the carriers. Now, we're going to talk about algorithm. Algorithm basically allows you to make decisions about which operators are modulators, which operators are carriers. So these effects are going to have different effects on each different sound that you use them on. And they don't like just suddenly take control of each envelope and force each envelope to be like what these settings are. It basically scales each envelope to reflect your changes. So within a sound, say, you might have a modulator that has a really fast envelope and then a carrier that has a really slow envelope. As you increase this, it's going to increase both of them, but not in the same way. It's just going to scale those changes differently for each envelope. So you basically get whole new sounds. So that's what we're talking about here with these modulator and carrier envelope real-time controls. So let's listen to what happens. Okay. There's our sound. We're still with Smash It. I hope you don't mind. So we've made the attack of the modulators longer. And whereas at the beginning with our original sound, we had just kind of an attack transient, now we have kind of a new timbral thing. And then we've extended it to such a degree that now the effect is subtle and too long to even exist within the overarching envelope of the sound. So that's really interesting. And like we said before, like now you have a completely different sound and all you did was turn one little knob. Wow. Okay. Now we're like completely different. And all you've done is just, it's still the same preset. You've just completely messed with how the modulators affect the carriers.